At 6:12 in the evening, Lena Ortiz closes her laptop and leaves a glass office tower. The work does not leave with her. Upstairs, a second figure lifts the handoff packet from her desk, walks it past a wall clock, and enters a lit room in the cloud. This is Vale, Lena's persistent digital coworker. Not a person, not an employee, and not magic. Vale is a visual stand-in for a new class of cloud agents that can keep a bounded task moving after the person who started it has gone home. The strange part is not that software runs at night. Servers have done that for decades. The strange part is that the software can now read the brief, choose steps, use tools, test its own work, and return an artifact that looks like the beginning of a colleague's contribution. Call it a coworker and the imagination immediately outruns the evidence. A real coworker notices the mood in a meeting, understands why an old compromise exists, absorbs consequences, and can be held responsible for a judgment. A cloud agent does none of that by default. It has the context you provide, the tools you grant, the environment you prepare, and the limits of the product and plan you are using. Background does not mean infinite. Persistent does not mean conscious. Scheduled does not mean incapable of pausing. The productive metaphor is narrower. A task can remain alive when your attention moves elsewhere. The management work does not disappear. It moves into the shape of the handoff before the run and the quality of the review after it. Lena runs operations for a small software company. She knows the business rules, the people affected by a change, and the difference between a technically correct answer and a decision the company should actually make. Vale can search a bounded source set, inspect a repository, execute tests, organize evidence, and keep a checklist moving. Their wardrobes stay constant because their roles do. Lena wears the amber watch that marks decisions. Vale wears cyan seams that light only when a tool is active. Lena owns the outcome. Vale owns no outcome at all. The value appears in the connection. One character can hand off repeatable execution without handing off authority. Traditional knowledge work is synchronized around presence. Open the laptop, gather the files, perform the steps, watch the progress bar, and keep the problem in working memory. Asynchronous agents split that block into a relay. At 5, Lena writes the acceptance criteria. At 7, Vale assembles the environment. At midnight, tests reveal a broken assumption. At 1, the task stops at a checkpoint instead of inventing a policy. At 8, Lena sees a report with the failure, the evidence, and the exact decision required. The clock did not create intelligence. It created another scheduling surface for cognition. Human attention at the judgment points, machine execution between them. There are 3 different experiences hiding under the word assistant. Chat is synchronous. Ask, answer, refine. Work is outcome-shaped. Give the system files, constraints, and a finished deliverable to produce while you steer progress. Cloud delegation goes one step further. A task receives its own environment and can continue without occupying the human screen. These modes overlap, but they create different management problems. A weak chat answer wastes a minute. A weak overnight delegation can waste a night, touch the wrong branch, or produce a beautiful report about the wrong question. The farther the task travels from live supervision, the more explicit its rails must become. OpenAI's current Codex documentation describes each cloud task as running in an isolated sandbox with a repository and configured environment. Anthropic describes Claude code on the web through the same architectural idea, an isolated cloud sandbox, with credentials kept out and Git operations routed through a scope proxy. GitHub's cloud agent works on a controlled branch and returns a pull request. Different products, same lesson. The agent is never just a model. It is a model inside a room. What files are in that room? Which tools work? Which domains can it reach? Which credentials are absent? Which door leads back to a human? Environment design is management made executable. Lena's first handoff fails before Vale writes a line. The packet says, improve the onboarding flow. Improve for whom? Which screen is in scope? What must not change? What evidence counts as better? OpenAI's internal Codex guide recommends prompts shaped like issues, with file paths, components, examples, and relevant documentation. That advice is not glamorous because management rarely is. A durable handoff contains the objective source of truth, constraints, acceptance tests, stop conditions, and the person who decides. The packet is not overhead. It is the portable piece of organizational memory that lets work survive a change in attention. The next packet is precise, but the room is broken. A dependency is missing. The test database cannot start. A setup script assumes a secret that the sandbox correctly does not have. OpenAI's operating guide says teams reduce errors by iteratively improving startup scripts, environment variables, and permitted internet access. This is a compounding effect. The first agent run exposes one broken step. The team repairs the setup. The 10th task begins with a room that already knows how to build, test, and explain failure. An organization that only buys a model gets a clever visitor. An organization that maintains the room gets a repeatable production system. When work can continue in the background, the inbox turns inside out. Lena no longer keeps every small investigation in her head. She writes bounded tasks into a queue: reproduce the bug, compare the contracts, verify the dashboard numbers, prepare the migration plan. OpenAI describes using the Codex task queue as a lightweight backlog, a staging area for partial work and incidental fixes. The queue has a hidden advantage. It forces prioritization. A request needs an owner, an order, and an end condition before compute begins. The agent may never log off, but the organization still needs to decide what deserves to run. Vale opens 3 isolated lanes. One traces the failing test. One inventories the affected files. One checks the documentation against the code. OpenAI's Codex product materials describe built-in work trees and cloud environments for parallel work. GitHub's agent interface likewise shows multiple sessions running at once. Parallelism feels like speed until all 3 lanes return together. Then Lena becomes the bottleneck. She must decide which evidence is trustworthy, which change is compatible, and which branch should survive. The scarce resource moves from keystrokes to review attention. Faster execution without a review budget produces a queue of unknown decisions. The first checkpoint appears before action. Vale places the objective on one side of a gate and every excluded system on the other. Read the issue, inspect the repository, propose a patch. Do not message customers. Do not change billing. Do not publish. Do not use sources outside the approved set. Scope is not merely a prompt sentence. It is a boundary the tools can enforce. A good overnight task contains the smallest authority required to produce a reviewable result. The agent should not need executive power to perform clerical exploration. For a large change, Lena asks for a plan before implementation. Vale maps the files, risks, tests, and rollback path, then stops. OpenAI's first-party guide recommends this plan-first pattern for large changes because it helps ground the follow-up work. The checkpoint is valuable even when the plan is wrong. Wrong plans are cheap to reject. Wrong migrations discovered after a long, unattended run are expensive to unwind. The human does not review every token of thought. She reviews the structure of the intended action, while changing direction is still easy. The cyan seems on Vale's jacket light as tools enter the room. Repository read, test runner, package cache, approved documentation. The production database stays dark. OpenAI says Codex Cloud Network access is disabled by default and can be expanded per project, while warning about prompt injection, exfiltration, malware, and license risk. GitHub limits branch access, credentials, triggers, and internet paths. Anthropic separates file system and network isolation. The shared principle is least authority. Useful autonomy is not the absence of doors. It is the ability to move quickly inside a room whose doors were chosen on purpose. At 2 in the morning, Vale finishes a patch. But the artifact is not merely the diff. Beside it sit the tests that ran, the the terminal output, the source links, the screenshots, the assumptions, and one failed check that remains unresolved. OpenAI recommends reviewing agent work and points to citations, terminal logs, and test results. GitHub exposes session logs and security checks. Evidence turns an invisible night shift into something inspectable. A result without a trail asks Lena to trust the animation of work. A result with a trail lets her test the claim. GitHub's documented cloud agent loop makes the handoff concrete. A person assigns an issue or starts a session. The agent works asynchronously on a controlled branch. When it finishes, it opens a pull request and adds the person as reviewer. Comments can send the agent back for another pass. The pull request is valuable because it combines proposed change, discussion, checks, identity, and history in one object. It is not proof that the code is good. It is a familiar place where responsibility can reconnect before the change enters the product. GitHub explicitly requires human review before its cloud agent's draft pull request can merge, and the agent cannot approve its own work. OpenAI likewise recommends agents as additional reviewers, not replacements for human review. This boundary is easy to mock as friction. It is actually the answer to a basic question: who lives with the consequence? Lena checks the behavior, not the confidence of the pros. She reads the test that would fail if the bug returned. She asks whether an excluded customer path changed. The final click is small, but it carries the accountability Vale cannot hold. NIST AI Risk Management Framework Playbook recommends histories, audit logs, documented human oversight, records of overrides and errors, escalation paths, and go or no-go decisions. GitHub's agent records link actions to a session and the human who initiated it. Commits and audit events make the work traceable. An audit trail is not a warehouse of screenshots. It answers a story: who asked, what authority was granted, what changed, which evidence passed, where the agent stopped, who approved, and how to reverse the decision. A 24-hour coworker without that story is not persistent. It is merely hard to observe. Vale reaches toward the open web, and the permission gate closes. Both OpenAI and GitHub warn that internet access can expose an agent to malicious instructions, data leakage, compromised dependencies, and content with licensing problems. GitHub's firewall documentation also says a firewall is not comprehensive and does not cover every process or integration. The correct lesson is not never connect. Some tasks need current documentation or packages. The lesson is that network access is part of the task design. Allow the domains and methods needed, keep secrets out of reach, log blocked attempts, and review what crossed the boundary. At 3:15, a product manager changes the requirement in another system. Vale continues with the old packet because no trigger delivered the update. Background execution preserves a task. It does not guarantee that every relevant fact stays synchronized. The longer a run lasts, the more likely prices change, branches move, permissions expire, or business decisions arrive elsewhere. A good long-running task declares its freshness window and source of truth. It checks before consequential steps. If the world has moved, it stops with a question instead of confidently completing yesterday's job. The most dangerous overnight result is not a crash. It is a clean green report for a target that no longer matters. Vale can pass every listed test and still miss the newly agreed behavior. This is stale success. Execution is correct relative to frozen instructions, while the organization has changed around it. The remedy is visible on Lena's clock board: expiry time, revalidation step, and a named checkpoint before external action. Long-running agents increase the value of freshness metadata because they separate the moment of instruction from the moment of consequence. Another task says, clean up the customer list. Vale finds duplicates. Should it merge accounts, delete records, or prepare a report? In a live conversation, Lena would hear the ambiguity and answer in seconds. In an unattended run, an unstated assumption can propagate through every later step. The safest behavior is a deliberate stop with the smallest useful artifact, the duplicate set, the possible rules, and the decision required. An agent that asks at the right time is not less autonomous. It is better aligned with the actual distribution of authority. OpenAI's current scheduled tasks documentation describes one-off and recurring tasks, broader time windows, and monitoring that can remember prior runs and stop when an end condition is met. As of this research freeze, OpenAI says scheduled tasks are globally available to Plus, Pro, Business, and Enterprise users on ChatGPT web, mobile, and desktop. The page also documents plan-specific active task limits, no more than hourly execution, and possible automatic pauses after inactivity. The scheduled page is in ChatGPT, not Codex. Platform, plan, limits, and pause behavior matter. Never logs off is a hook. The real product is a bounded schedule with state. ChatGPT work extends the pattern beyond code. OpenAI says work can create finished deliverables, run once, repeat on a schedule or trigger, monitor for change, and pause for questions or approval. But availability must be read with the claim. The current Help Center says work is gradually rolling out to eligible paid accounts. Cloud work runs on web and mobile. Desktop and local file behavior depend on plan, workspace permission, rollout state, and explicit access. OpenAI's July release note described supported region availability and a staged plan rollout. No documentary should flatten that into everyone has it now. Codex is a separate technical work surface. OpenAI's current plan article lists the app on Mac OS and Windows, the CLI, IDE extension, and Codex Web, with cloud delegation in an isolated sandbox. It says Plus, Pro, Business, and Enterprise or Edu include Codex, while free and go access is described as limited time. Usage and workspace controls vary. A connected GitHub account is required for the web cloud path described there. These details are not footnotes to the future of work. They are the difference between an architectural possibility and a feature a particular team can use today. Lena scores every candidate task across 5 columns. Bounded. Can the outcome and exclusions fit on one page? Observable. Will the run produce tests, sources, logs, or a diff? Reversible. Can a bad result be rejected without harming a customer? Fresh. Does the source of truth remain valid for the runtime? Owned. Is one person named to review the result? A task that fails several columns may still benefit from an agent, but not unattended. The scorecard replaces the vague question, is the agent smart enough? With the operational question, is this delegation shaped well enough to survive distance from its manager? Before Lena leaves, she performs a 6-minute ritual. Write one outcome, attach the current sources, list the forbidden actions, define the evidence, set the freshness deadline, name the stop conditions. Then she starts Vale in an isolated room with only the required tools. The run may explore, test, compare, draft, and package. It may not publish, spend, message, merge, or erase without a separate gate. In the morning, Lena reads the exceptions first, then the evidence, then the artifact. This is not the cinematic dream of an employee who never sleeps. It is a disciplined relay between execution and judgment. If these systems improve, teams may stop organizing every process around who is available at the same minute. Research can begin in one time zone, tests can run through another, and review can happen where domain responsibility lies. Roles shift toward writing durable context, maintaining environments, designing evals, triaging exceptions, and approving consequential actions. But the organization does not become mannerless. It becomes more explicit about management. Every agent lane needs a queue, a boundary, an evidence contract, and an owner. The org chart starts to look less like a row of desks and more like a network of review gates. At 8:03, Lena returns. Vale is waiting beside 3 artifacts, 1 tested patch, 1 research brief, and 1 blocked task with a precise question. That 3rd artifact is the proof of maturity. The system did not convert uncertainty into action merely to appear productive. Lena inspects the trail, rejects one assumption, and accepts the bounded work. Your next coworker may never log off in the sense that a configured cloud task schedule, or monitor can keep moving when you are absent, but it will still need a manager to decide what matters, what is allowed, what counts as evidence, and who owns the consequence. The future of work is not perpetual autonomy. It is better handoffs across the clock.